Capital Radio desde el Foro ICEX 2024. Presenta Luis Vicente Muñoz.
Escucha el mundo que viene en Capital Radio. Foro ICEX, estamos en directo, vamos a estarlo a lo largo de todo el día. Y estamos justo en ese momento especial del comienzo del foro. El encuentro que va a traer como invitado a alguien a quien todos deseamos escuchar. Enrico Letta, el profesor a quien la Comisión Europea encargó intentar dibujar en un documento cómo debe ser el futuro de Europa. Un encuentro, una mesa de trabajo inicial de la geopolítica, la geoeconomía, que tendrá también como invitados, tiene también como invitados al ministro de Economía del Gobierno de España, Carlos Cuerpo, a la secretaria de Estado, Amparo López Valcárcel, que estaba con nosotros aquí hace algunos minutos, y también a la propia consejera delegada de ICEX, Elisa Carbonell. Recibimos ya señal del auditorio, escuchamos en directo.
Claro, si esto es el Foro ICEX. El Foro ICEX, ante todo, es un foro de escucha, de información, de intercambio y de todo el acompañamiento que a través del Ministerio de Economía, Comercio y Empresa y, por supuesto, del ICEX vamos a llevar a cabo. Y aunque son muchos los temas que se van a tocar hoy, ya nos los ha contado la conductora del acto, todos tienen como nexo de unión dos nuevos escenarios en los que nos enfrentamos y que nos afectan a todos. Estoy hablando, por un lado, de la importancia de la geopolítica en las relaciones económicas y comerciales y, por otro lado, del impacto de la doble transición económica y digital. Para tratar el primero de los temas, como ya hemos dicho, tenemos esa interesante charla que va a conducir nuestra consejera delegada de la geopolítica a la geoeconomía y con estos dos ponentes de excepción, que son el ministro Carlos Cuerpo y, por supuesto, el profesor Letta, que, como todos sabéis, es el autor del informe Much More Than a Market, que pone de manifiesto la necesidad de una actualización y de impulsar de manera decidida el mercado interior, que se concibió hace más de 30 años en un entorno absolutamente diferente del actual. Y como señala el propio profesor Letta, y si me permitís lo voy a parafrasear literalmente, el mercado único es producto de una época en la que tanto la Unión Europea como el mundo eran más pequeños, más sencillos, menos integrados y en los que muchos de los protagonistas actuales aún no habían entrado en escena. El número de Estados miembros era menos de la mitad del actual, Alemania estaba dividida en dos y la Unión Soviética aún no existía. China e India juntas constituían menos del 5% de la economía mundial. Y existen también muchas cosas que han cambiado desde entonces, pero no, en ese sentido no tenemos que retrotraernos a hace 4 o 5 décadas. Basta con que nos fijemos en los últimos acontecimientos de los últimos 4 o 5 años, que no hace falta además ni mencionar. Y además a esos cambios tan profundos a nivel geopolítico debemos añadir cómo ha irrumpido la tecnología en nuestra vida, no solo en nuestras empresas, sino en nuestra vida actual y diaria. La inteligencia artificial, que promete alterar el peso relativo de los distintos factores en los procesos productivos, es sin duda una oportunidad que tenemos que aprovechar siempre, como nos recuerda a menudo nuestro ministro. Y a todo lo anterior tenemos que añadir la transición ecológica, la transición verde, que busca aplicar un factor de sostenibilidad de todas nuestras acciones y decisiones, y en el sector energético aprovechar ya nos permite hablar de una nueva normal. Y los países que sepamos aprovechar esta transición o esta nueva tecnología energética podemos encontrarnos ante un factor de producción, la energía, barato y sin externalidades negativas. Y esta es la nota con la que me quiero quedar. El mundo ha cambiado, nos enfrentamos a nuevos retos y nos debemos preparar para afrontar todo aquello que el futuro nos trae. Y en este marco, como decía antes, este foro es un foro de escucha y para ello queremos escuchar y hemos configurado los temas en varios talleres relativos a las tendencias globales, a la capacitación de los sectores y, por supuesto, en último lugar, un análisis sobre las perspectivas de nuestras industrias más internacionalizadas. Y bueno, voy llegando ya al final de mi intervención porque lo importante ahora es escuchar al profesor Letta y al ministro Carlos Cuerpo, pero no quiero terminar sin volver a poner en valor lo que es este foro, que es un foro de escucha y es un foro distinto y especial y, como decía, el primero de muchos porque en él ponemos a la empresa en el centro. Queremos oíros, queremos escucharos, saber lo que os preocupa y también saber daros respuesta. Y, por favor, preguntadnos y permitirnos también mejorar Ya sabéis que hemos habilitado el espacio Te Escuchamos, en el que va a haber representantes de la Secretaría de Estado de Comercio y también de nuestras entidades. Están aquí, ICES, CESTE, COFIDES, el presidente del ICO también nos acompaña. Y vamos a utilizar todo este material y toda esta energía positiva para mejorar nuestra actuación y nuestra estrategia. En ese sentido, quiero agradecer la presencia hoy de nuestros 26 consejeros y consejeras económicos y comerciales que os van a brindar un excepcional apoyo y oportunidades de conocimiento, de mejora de vuestras posibilidades de internacionalización. Finalizo señalando que nosotros en el Ministerio tenemos el proyecto de crear un ICEX de alto impacto y estoy segura que con este foro, con vuestra aportación y con nuestro trabajo lo vamos a conseguir. Muchísimas gracias y espero que tengáis una jornada muy provechosa.
Capital Radio en el Foro ICEX 2024. Presenta Luis Vicente Muñoz.
Bien, pues ya se ha producido la inauguración institucional de este foro ICEX con la secretaria de Estado de Comercio, Amparo López Senovilla, que previamente pasó por este estudio en el foro ICEX de Capital Radio, en el que estamos mirando el futuro que viene en la exportación y en la empresa. Y ahora pues llega el momento quizás estelar de la mañana, que es la primera mesa, es un diálogo de la geopolítica a la geoeconomía entre Enrico Letta, el presidente del Instituto Jacques Delors y expresidente del Consejo de Ministros de Italia, que ha realizado el informe Mucho más que un mercado, encargado por la Comisión Europea sobre el futuro de Europa. Y también intervendrá en ese diálogo, claro, van a hacerlo a medias, Carlos Cuerpo, el ministro de Economía, Comercio y Empresa del Gobierno de España. Va a moderarlo la consejera delegada del ICEX, Elisa Carbonell, que por cierto, al final de la jornada estará aquí con nosotros en nuestro set también, compartiendo sus conclusiones, una mirada de los aprendizajes que esperamos obtener en este apasionante día que Capital Radio va a transmitir a las personas que no han podido estar aquí y que suponemos que son muchas, porque uno de los elementos que ya hemos podido verificar es que el éxito es rotundo ahora mismo por el número de asistentes. Se esperaban inicialmente unas 400 empresas y más de 1 millar. No sé si ha empezado ya en el auditorio, todavía no. Estamos a punto de ver cómo comienza este diálogo en el que se supone que vamos a poner el marco, el contexto principal del entorno en el que se mueven las empresas exportadoras. Principalmente en el marco del mercado único, que es donde, recordemos, según los datos, más de la mitad del comercio internacional de España se desarrolla. Vamos a escuchar en directo a Enrico Letta y a Carlos Cuerpo y a Elisa Carbonell.
Become the rule, and in times of uncertainty, can a peace project such as the EU be armed without losing its essence? Thank you so much, the two of you, for accepting the invitation to shed some light on such complex issues. Let's start from the beginning. What's happening? Professor Letta, the international system, based on multilateralism and a common set of rules, is facing significant challenges, including the resurgence of power politics. Your report calls for a more European integration, especially in key areas such as energy, telecommunications, and financial services. What practical opportunities or benefits would this integration bring for European and Spanish companies?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very sorry because I'm obliged to speak in English, but my Spanish is good for, but it becomes immediately Itañol, and So thank you also because it's a great pleasure for me to exchange with Carlos Cuerpo, great friendship and great consideration for what Carlos is doing here at European and global level. And I'm also very much interested in knowing what are the reasons why you are so pushing in the direction of a more pro-international and pro-European approach in a moment in which Secretary d'Estado mentioned just some minutes ago in a perfect way what are today the main problems we are having. And the main problem is the fact that in your work daily, you are confronted with the global markets in a new way in which pressure, power policy, as you said, lack of or weakening of the rule of law is something that is today the new normal, unfortunately. And at the same time, Europe, we are perceiving Europe for the most important part of Europe. Europe is a great tool at world level. Jacques Delors used to say always, we understand Europe when we are out of Europe. And I think it's your experience, all of you, working in the global level, you understand and you appreciate the role and the importance of Europe when we are out of Europe. And being out of Europe today means that we need to, I would say, to have a fine-tuning and overcoming some obstacles. In a few words, what are the main obstacles? I would like to say it in a very clear way. We have the euro in our wallets, and the euro is a powerful symbol. And the idea is that if we have the euro in our wallets, then Europe is there. Everywhere, in every part of our economic life. In reality, it is not the truth. You mentioned, Amparo, 3 sectors, and I will add a 4th sector. We will have time to discuss on it. But telecom, financial services, energy, and defense are 4 sectors decisive for competitiveness, security, jobs creation, I would say social cohesion too. And for these 4 sectors, the national level is more important than the European one. And if the national level is more important on telecom, on energy, on financial services, on defense, that means that we have to fight just with national tools in a world championship where the other competitors' names are China, India, Brazil, the BRICS, the USA. The level is totally different. I would like to mention just one point. You mentioned the difference between China and India when the single market started and China and India today. It is very simple. When Jacques Delors created the single market, with, of course, the big support of leaders like Mitterrand, Kohl, González, Andreotti, and the others, China and India together were as big as Italy and Spain together at that time. I think it's a smile that we are today having when we think that China and India together were like Italy and Spain. And today, China and India are 25% of the world GDP. And China and India are influencing everything is happening, also on space. You mentioned space, and space we had 2 days ago. We weren't there, and I'm sure that it was not the most followed TV program because it was at the same time of France-Spain semi-final. But Ariane, the rocket in Guyane, it was a great accomplishment for all the European space industry. But we know very well that on all these issues, we are lagging behind. We are lagging behind not because of us, because the rest of the world is changing. And on these 4 subjects, the system is the same, almost the same on 39 years ago. So we have to move. And I would like to thank the Spanish presidency for the initiatives during the semester that you took on these issues. And in very short terms, I would like to say that next week the European Parliament will give the confidence vote to the President of the Commission. And I think the next 7 days, because it would be next Thursday, will be decisive for the program and how to set up the program for the next 5 years. And the program for the next 5 years, in my view, needs to have 4 clear roadmaps. And the 4 clear roadmaps are the roadmaps on how to have, on financial services, energy, telecom, and defense, a single market in the next 5 years. Able to avoid what we are experiencing today. You know, when we discuss on these topics today, is always a discussion about a very ideological approach. The European flag against the national flag, or the national flag against the European flag. In reality, it is not an ideological problem. It's a problem of job creation, it's a problem of growth, it's a problem of competitiveness. Can tell you that, for instance, the financial services sector is a sector where the fact that you don't have a big European financial market to find money to growth, to invest, and you have just a national financial market, and the other global companies, they have a US financial market, a Chinese financial market, they can find money to invest, and you don't. And your money, my money, our savings are going to the US every year because the US market is more attractive. And why the US market is more attractive? Because it is more innovative, but first of all, because it is more integrated. Nasdaq is as big as all the European stock exchanges together plus 50%. And the attractiveness of these markets, of the US financial market, you know very well the consequence. Our money is going there and is feeding the American companies. These American companies, strengthened by our own savings, are flying back, crossing the Atlantic, buying your companies with our money. And I think this is the crazy suicide of the national sovereignism approach. I think against what we need today. We need a more integrated European approach, more effective, with the possibility to give you more money to invest. If you don't invest, in the world of today, you will suffer. And if you don't invest in innovation, the US companies will win. I mentioned the space industry. Space industry, Carlos, is a perfect example. Today we have Indian investments, Arab investments, US investments. They are coming in Europe, buying our medium companies in the space industry. It's a small sector, but because you mentioned Moon, Mars, and so on, I think it's a good example. It's an example where we are strong. We can be strong. We were strong. And today we are losing ground because of the lack of money to invest. We will have time to discuss about defense, but I wanted just to mention this point. And maybe I end up with a very small example, because when I present the report, the big risk is to be too much focused on figures, economic frameworks, and so on. But in reality, it's normal life. The lack of integration is a problem of normal life. I give you one example. When I decided to accept the invitation from the Spanish presidency to write the report, to prepare the report, I decided to have it bottom-up. So I visited 65 cities in Europe in 8 months, traveling around all the 27 countries. And when I organized my journey around Europe, my idea was Europe is the smallest continent in the world. We decided to go green. When I travel within my own country, I travel by high-speed train. I used to live in France for a period of my life. I used to travel by TGV. Here in Spain, you travel by high-speed train, usually, the same in Germany, and I suddenly realized that it is impossible to travel by the different capitals in Europe by high-speed train. The high-speed train is connecting the capital of the regions within one country. It is not connecting the capital of our countries within Europe. I think is the symbol, emblematic symbol of the problem of Europe and of the coexistence of the two flags. We need to keep the two flags together, but we need to have the European dimension stronger. Otherwise, I want to be, sorry if I'm a little bit vulgar in this slogan, if we don't integrate, the only that will be happy is Wall Street and Beijing. And I think we have to be aware of that.
Thank you very much, Minister. An European approach means more common projects, European public goods and investments that can only be made jointly in strategic areas that Professor Letter has mentioned. This, of course, would open up new opportunities for our companies, but it requires bold decisions regarding the financial architecture of the EU, as Professor mentioned. The subtitle of his report, Speed, Security and Solidarity, has caught my attention. The first word, speed, very contemporary, but somehow counterintuitive sometimes when discussing the European Union. Does Europe have the necessary sense of urgency? I sure have, after listening to Professor Letter, to make decisions that reach out the agreements required by current circumstances, or to phrase him, are we going to get the high-speed train of integration fast enough?
Thank you. Thank you, Elisa. I have to say that at first I was a bit scared because I thought this was going to be a musical dialogue when I saw the guitar in there, but so that it's fine. And in a sense, if you allow me, Nico, you're like a rock star doing a tour of European capital, so you need a T-shirt with the whole tour. So it's a great pleasure being here with you and discussing EU issues again. Because they're relevant and because they're pressing. And I completely agree with you. You said we need to move. You just said it. And I think this sense of urgency is instilled in the report. And it is somehow getting into the senses of the European institutions and into the senses of the European ministers as well, and also leaders. And because usually at EU level we're good at responding and coming together in crisis times. We showed it just a few years ago with the pandemic. We did set up quickly Next-Gen EU funds, which has been instrumental, not only for the recovery after the pandemic, but for as a first step towards thinking in this truly transformative way that we should be thinking forward. So we did put it in place first as a sense of twin transitions. We knew that we needed to go forward with this, but since then I think the objectives have been enlarged so much that we're talking about a completely different sense of urgency at a different level. So we have pressing challenges. We're not under a crisis, but we need to provide for this response. So we're good under crisis times. We need to also be good when the sun is shining, but the challenges are pressing, and they're not maybe short-term, but the medium-term challenges. And I think this is potentially the most difficult thing to also comprehend, given the complex governance at EU level that we need to push, even though we're not under huge short-term stress. But the challenges, we've mentioned them, is of course the climate emergency, the digital transformation, which is exponential, and we should not lose that train. Of course, challenges related to aging population, which are coming to all of us around Europe, lagging productivity, geopolitical fragmentation worldwide. So all these challenges require for a common approach and to take advantage of this window of opportunity to seize the moment. But we need this sense of urgency to be able to really push forward. Because one of the first discussions that we had with Nico was, listen, we will mostly agree on 99% of the recommendations that will come out of the report, and not only in Spain, but mostly throughout Europe. But we need to put them into practice. So we need those recommendations not to be forgotten and put on there or within a shelf. We need them to really be transformative. Otherwise, we always have this sense of frustration that we know what to do, but we're not able to do it. So this is why it is so important that the report that Nico is presenting really enters into the details on how to, in practice, get the job done, which for me, as a minister, really understanding that we need to move, we need to spend political capital both at the EU and also at the national level to push for these reforms. We need to understand that they're feasible, that they're realistic, and that we can, in a practical way, in a short term, in a short period of time, push them forward. But let me maybe give two horizontal vectors or land these concerns that Nico's voicing around these 4 sectors on 2 horizontal dimensions. So the first one is single market, which crosses around the report all the time, and the second one is a financing gap. So on a single market dimension, I would like to pick up on one idea, which is this District 28, that I think has been one of the most successful ideas so far in the report, not only because it's innovative, but also, again, because it's a practical way to push forward. So we know that we have at the EU level 27 regulatory regimes, and we need a fast track. We need to really get the sense of an optimal internal single market. We need a fast track for companies to be able to really get a smooth operation framework in all 27 member states. So this 28th district is the way forward with a minimum set of requirements that will allow our companies, and this is particularly important also for SMEs where the cost of compliance is usually higher, that will allow them to really enter into or to really tap on these 450 million consumers space, which is the biggest in the world. So we need that at this point with a practical purview. And what I've done, also somehow thinking of this as an inspiration, we're working at the national level, landing these into national recommendations, and we're working with pilot cases with some specific sectors on constructing what we would call Districts 18 in Spain. You know, we have 17 autonomous regions where the situation or where we face similar issues than the ones that we face at EU level, that there are some asymmetries, some heterogeneities in the main regulation or the barriers that firms face in order to compete, in order to fully tap on the Spanish market. So we need to provide in this specific sector. We are beginning with the retail distribution so that we can really foster this, and this can serve somehow as a first step towards integration at EU level. So maybe a pilot for the 28th, beginning with the 18th at the national level. I think what I would like to be the second step of this 18th regime would be to integrate the Iberian Peninsula. So we kind of populate the whole EU by beginning with Portugal and Spain, but this would require a lot of political effort as well, because in a sense, in Spain always, when we think about retail distribution as well, it's not just about the state. So decisions and somehow the regions are also competent in terms of setting up requirements and rules. So we have to cooperate amongst the different actors. And this is the effort that we will be putting into place, hopefully in the second semester, with some results, positive results in these pilot cases. But on these regulatory barriers, which are in the end the main obstacle to gather the full potential of the single market. So while we work on the normative side, while we work on pushing for the simplification, I think we need to provide also for a short-term solution for firms, particularly SMEs. So what we're doing here is, again, together with the with COE, with CEPIME, with the firms associations, what we're doing is trying to tap on all the opportunities that we have thanks to new technological developments, and in particular AI. So what we want is for new artificial intelligence tools to be able to ease or to simplify the life of our SMEs. For example, I think of the regulatory barriers as a big iceberg, and what we would want is these AI tools to have or to lead our companies to be at the surface. And the AI tools would lead with most of the complications of the red tape that would lie beneath the surface. And somehow that would free up some productive time or more productive time for our SMEs. And this is particularly important now. You might not be aware, Nico, but we are discussing in Spain our trajectory towards reducing the number of hours that we work on a weekly basis, and how we make that compatible with an increase in productivity, and that wages and employment are not affected. And one way forward is, of course, increasing the intake of these digital tools and innovation, so that firms can make these elements compatible. And there are many examples where this is happening for small and medium enterprises, which are benefiting from innovation to be able to actually also make progress in terms of their social footprint. So I think this is another area where we will be hopefully also working together with ETHEX, with ECO, working together with all relevant public institutions as well, be able to provide for those services for our firms. And then my second point on the financing gap, I said that at the beginning our main objectives when we set up the recovery plan, Next Generation EU, was a twin transition. So digital, green, I think this was already in everyone's mind. But then the discussion somehow shifted towards strategic autonomy while we were having these disruptions in value chains. And then strategic autonomy, at the EU level became open strategic autonomy while we were trying to figure out what that actually meant. And then this, in the end, has evolved into economic security, which is, I think, a more general concept that also encompasses other elements. But what lies behind all these big objectives are huge investment needs for the next decades, on green transformation, on digital transformation, and on the reindustrialization, which is what it lies behind all this strategic autonomy agenda. We will need all available financing sources to be able to really fulfill these objectives and make good on these promises. And here I would just like to quickly mention, of course we understand that there are two big financing sources, private sector, public sector. Within the public sector, we have the domestic and the EU level. We know that at the domestic level, we have our own fiscal space. Each country is also limited not only by fiscal rules, but by the competition policy at EU level. But we have the overall EU level, the common issuance of debt and the common provision of some of these genuinely EU public goods, which has turned out to be a success story in terms of Next Generation, and where we need to think beyond 2026. So Next Generation will end in 2026, but we need to provide for additional tools that will really, as you said yourself, give an EU dimension to the provision of these needs, to the provision of this financing of these investments. And this is one of the main discussions that we will be having as soon as the next Commission resumes. And this is, I think, this will be key for the future of the European economy, because it will have to be also complementary to what we do at the private sector level. So we need to make good on the capacity of this public financing to leverage on private capital, and for that we need to provide for the perfect conditions in our private market, in our capital markets, to be able to develop and to provide for these funds for investments. And this is another area where I think urgency is at stake, and everyone is signaling that we need to make progress. There are specific innovations that are being proposed, like a common EU savings or pan-European savings product. So I think that we will see in the next few months not only initiatives but things that will be coming, and hopefully all these pulled together can provide for a good avenue, and we can be optimistic on not only so we can call for action, and we have to be here aware of the urgency, but also optimistic on the way forward and on the fact that we can provide for these solutions.
Minister, one more question and then I'll let you drink some water. One does not need to look very hard to realize that the race for security, strategic autonomy has led to numerous restricting measures globally, no? These measures have been multiplied by 14 since before the pandemic. Should we definitely say farewell to free trade and openness? Or is this a passing trend? And with access to certain markets becoming more complicated, is investment on local markets rather than exports the solution for our companies?
Okay, I'll be quick because I was a bit too long on my first one. But so here, I think we need to find a genuine EU approach to this whole discussion on international trade. So we're not the US, we're not China, we're not India, and we have our own specific features which I think call for, as I said, for a EU specific argument and narrative. To some extent, of course, the defense, so two main arguments here, the defense of a rules-based global playing field, which is leveled, of course, where our companies can compete under equal conditions. So open trade has been the backbone of EU's success. We are a truly open economy at the EU level, and we thrive when we can compete. We're good at that. But, and this is my second point, we have to make sure that competition is fair and square, so that our companies compete on equal grounds with foreign companies. So we need not being naive in the sense of, okay, we have to be open, we have to respect open rules-based order, international trade order, WTO rules, of course. But when we feel that our companies are being threatened or penalized by actions outside of the realm of the rule-based order, we need to protect them. We need to truly engage into this element of strategic autonomy for, Nico was mentioning, these four key sectors, but we really need to understand that there is a role for European institutions and for national institutions to protect our companies in those strategic sectors. There are defensive measures, of course, like the ones that the European Commission is putting on the table in the case of the electric vehicles, but there are also, I think, offensive tools and measures for our companies to really engage into the protection or the true reindustrialization or finding our way in this new international order. So we should avoid a subsidy race. Our pockets are not somehow as deep as others. So in this context, we also have to avoid trade war or an escalation of retaliation measures. That's a lose-lose for everyone. So another important area, as I said, in terms of positive measures or offensive measures for our firms, is finding markets and diversifying their strategic outreach, not only to markets where they are already present, and I think of, for example, for Spanish firms, the presence in Latin America is becoming more and more strategic, but also the Maghreb, north of Africa. So I think Spanish firms really have to foster an increased presence, because that will prove to be a key comparative advantage going forward, a key competitiveness vector. And wherever we go, I think the role of Spain as a bridge between Europe and Latin America or other regions is always put on the table, and it's always a positive element to consider. But then, of course, exploring and stepping up efforts in new markets, which might seem a bit more far away in cultural terms or even physically or geographically, like Asia, for example. We were in Japan last week, and also Japanese authorities We're pushing for Japan to be an open door to the rest of Asia. So I think Australia, Canada, there are many more opportunities also within this context of friendshoring, where companies can foster a deeper presence, deeper ties, and as you said, also with an element of getting national associates, getting within the country as a good step towards really developing fruitful relationships.
Thank you. Let's talk public procurement, Professor. You argue that the reliance on the lowest price award criterion as the default approach should be reevaluated. You also suggest that we should set a minimum quota of innovation procurement for member states. These are powerful ideas. If the EU moves in this direction, these changes and innovations could potentially be introduced in procurement processes elsewhere, including maybe multilateral financial institutions. Are there any existing examples that could serve as inspiration?
But I think the main topic here is innovation. In the report, I try to relaunch the need for more innovation in Europe. I was really very impressed, negatively impressed, by visiting all the 27 countries and meeting a lot of young start-uppers. And all these young start-uppers full of ideas and full of goodwill. And they told me the same. From Tallinn to Coimbra, from my own country to Dublin, they all told me the same. I want to go to the US. Because in the US I will find the best environment to grow, no risk aversion, investment and money to grow and to scale. And first of all, I will find money to scale if I have a failure. Here in Europe, if I have a failure, is finished. There's a stigma. And we were discussing, you were mentioning artificial intelligence. To get the result they had in the US, they were obliged to invest and fail, invest and fail, invest and fail. Then they had the result that are today leading at world level. This is the main point. This is why in the report I launched the idea of the fifth freedom. You know, the single market is well known as the market of the four freedoms: goods, services, capitals and persons. In the treaty, in the European treaty, these four freedoms are mentioned, Article 26. In reality, goods, services, capital and persons are very much 20th century economy based. It is the tangible, what we touch. In reality today, we have to invest on the intangible, and this is the fundamental point. But I want to take the opportunity to touch one point that Carlos mentioned. Why this example of the 28th district, that is a virtual 28th state. You can choose, you, companies, enterprises, you can choose this business law, the business law of this 28th district, a European business law, and through this choice, you can have a passport to going everywhere in Europe without the need that today you have to have a legal office of 50 people or a fiscal office of 50 people obliging you to change business law or moving from Croatia to Sweden. And this is fundamental also for all of you when you want to attract investors from abroad. Here I'm talking to the 26 here, the 26 people of ESEX working on attracting investments. Why is so important? Because your ability to be convincing to the foreign investors can be doubled if you can tell them, I give you a great environment to invest, that is Spain. Maybe with this 18th national district, it could be better. But investing in Spain, you have all the single market open to you. That is the most important attractiveness of the investments in the single countries. But this kind of attractiveness can work only if we have simplifications like the one I mentioned. Because if you ask an investor in telecom, you come to Spain, you come in Europe, but then Spain is a single market because there is no European telecom single market, it is clear that something is not working there. And the same is for energy, the same is for the other sectors. So my main point here is to say if we don't take advantage of the dimension of the single market, the consequence of that is that the main comparison and the main difference with 85, when the single market was created, is the fact that today there are alternatives. Today, for an investor, there's full of alternatives in the world. You have many countries, non-democratic countries, giving you a fast track to invest, to put money, to make money. And if we in Europe, we are too bureaucratic, it's too complicated, 27 financial system, 27 fiscal system, 27 business law, and of course complicated also within countries, I think it would be very complicated to convince people to come here and to invest here. Of course, Europe is a lovable country. People like to be here and to invest here, but we can't always use this, I would say, sexy tool to attract people. Because otherwise people come here for vacation or for having fun, and they will invest in other countries. Because the intangible also is this aspect. You can invest everywhere, having fun here. And frankly speaking, I don't want my kids will grow up in a Disneyland, in a European Disneyland. I want to come here and to invest here in a land of innovation, creativity, a land of future, not the land of the past.
I was going to say we are running out of time. I think we could all stay here for hours and hours listening to you, but there's a very intense agenda. I will give you a few minutes each for closing remarks. Professor, would you like to start?
You know, I mentioned defense
yes,
minutes ago. I would like just to say one word on that, because today defense is emblematic. It's a shame. I want to use the correct terms. We decided, and it was right decision, and we have to continue helping and supporting the Ukrainian resistance. We spend money to help them. We spent European taxpayer money. Our money was to buy military furnitures that we sent to Ukraine. In these 2 years and a half, we spent a lot of money. Taxpayer money, European taxpayer money. 80%, 80, not 18, 80% of this money was to buy non-EU military furnitures. 80% was to have jobs creation in Michigan, Wisconsin, Turkey, South Korea. The same period, the US spent a lot of money to support Ukraine. And the same figure, the 80%, for them is 12%. So 88% of what they spent was to buy US military furnitures and to have jobs creation in Michigan, Wisconsin, and so on. Why? Because we are working in a separate way. We are working having 16 different helicopters, types of helicopters. We are working having 15 different types of tanks. We are not working together, the different defense industry among the different countries, for political reasons. And the consequence is that we have job creation in Michigan, Turkey, and South Korea, and not job creation here. And it is a sector where we have to consider that our money has to be there in an innovative and dual way we are a continent that is for peace, and we want to use our money to have peace through job creation in Europe. I think this example, it is very simple, because it is not impossible to get the US approach on that. Mm-hmm. It is very simple. It depends on the political will. It depends on the political will to understand if the two flags, they have to be combined together. That if we have more activities at the European level, then the geographical return to the Spanish flag will be bigger than the one having just the national flag. This is the key issue. We have to work on that, and we have to work with great intensity. This is why I'm so sorry. In my report, I was very vocal, and in the presentations that I'm having around Europe, I'm very vocal. We have no more time. The next years will be decisive. I want to say that inertia means decline in Europe. It is not just that we have to defend. I'm Italian, but I don't like catenaccio. So no more catenaccio. We have to be very, very offensive. We have to play as Spain next Sunday.
Minister, political will, urgency.
No, I think you said it all, and the final message on the final, I think, was also very relevant. I mean, from my side, just to maybe recover one message that I said at the beginning, I think we all agree on the urgency. We all agree on the need to push further this element of integration. And from this side, we have to really think of the lessons that we have learned over the past 4 years, of what a true European response means and how much we can achieve by pushing for this European common response, and how well the positive incentives do actually work also in terms of fostering the agenda of structural reforms, which is key also to increase our potential growth going forward. So I think we can easily say at this point that Next Generation and recovery plans are being a success story, and that we need to repeat that we need to foster this genuine European approach of integration and solidarity going forward, so that we can go beyond 2026 and really have a say in this very uncertain and complex geopolitical context. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this food for thought.
Aquí seguimos en tanto, en directo en Capital Radio. Acaban de escuchar la primera mesa del foro ICEX, de la geopolítica a la geoeconomía, con algunos argumentos contundentes en estos últimos minutos y en las conclusiones, cómo aprovechaba Enrico Letta para mostrar una realidad terrible de los europeos. Estamos ayudando a Ucrania a defenderse de la agresión rusa. ¿Y qué nos encontramos? Que el 80% del dinero que estamos gastando los europeos en defensa, en ayudar a Ucrania, es dinero para comprar material bélico, 80%, fuera de la Unión Europea. Material bélico a Estados Unidos, a Corea del Sur, incluso a Turquía. Se preguntaba Letta con mucho criterio, ¿y por qué no hacemos lo que deberíamos hacer? Y es, en vez de que cada país esté construyendo sus tanques o sus helicópteros, trabajamos juntos los europeos. Trabajamos por la paz, generando industria y empleo dentro de la Unión Europea. Un argumento contundente de los últimos minutos. Y del ministro de Economía, Carlos Cuerpo, bueno, pues mejor le escucharemos en directo, porque en unos instantes va a ser nuestro invitado especial en el set que Capital Radio ha desplegado aquí en este foro ICEX, y desde el que va a estar transmitiendo en directo, como está haciendo ahora mismo, durante todo el día, con muchísimos invitados, porque aquí los protagonistas son los empresarios internacionalizados, los exportadores.